Hello, YouTube Internet friends. Today I'm going to just share some more thoughts. I've been working with the concept of beauty. I'm not finished with that, but I'm going to interject a video. I'm going to post a video, and it's basically my thoughts today. I'm feeling that there is what I'm conceiving of more and more a post-Fukushima reality, a post-Fukushima world that we exist in. And the kind of world that I perceive we are entering, it's a fundamentally, radically different existence than what it is that has built over time, a long period of time. There has been a fundamental change in what I believe to be a shared existence that is actually now becoming more divided and split. I'm going to elaborate on this. This is what I was thinking about. There's a lot of stuff that's going through my head, and this post-Fukushima world that is beginning to influence me, and not necessarily in the way that some people are saying that, of course, like the influences, the external influences on our thoughts, on our very essence, on our being, as toxicities that get into us and alter the way we are perceiving the reality that we exist in, and to be able to distinguish what it actually is that we're involved in has been a major preoccupation among thoughtful people that have attempted to articulate some kind of common thread. If you look at philosophers from way back, and just people who have attempted to distinguish between, fundamentally, I think, stuff that works and stuff that doesn't work. And I'm going to separate the concept of working and not working into a synthetic and an organic concept. Now, these are just words, and words, like most people that post are basically wordsmiths, not even good ones at that for the most part. But people attach a great deal of importance to words which are rather limited, but I'm going to do it. I'm a painter, so I make images. I make paintings that represent something of my inner world. You've seen them whenever I do my dissertations. You've seen them. And today I was paying attention to a few different people. One person I really like, actually, he's represented to me an integral soul, is Charles Veitch. Whatever his issues and problems might be, the way he comes across to me is someone of integrity and depth and reflection and thoughtfulness that is attempting to navigate this this fundamental dichotomy in life, that about things that work and things that don't work. I think he's done some admirable things. Check out Charles Veitch. And another individual that I'm subscribed to, that I pay attention every now and then, is this Quinn Michael guy who is supposedly a computer programmer. He lives out of his car, and he's quite an original sort of AI computer-oriented character who has commentary on how the AI is taking over more and more. The AI, which is part of the post-Fukushima existence. The reason the AI is going to function very well is because nuclear toxicity is very conducive to the idea of AI. That's part of my sort of thought process here. And again, it's a synthetic aspect of this mystery that we're all involved in. And really, there are no divisions in terms of our existence between like the notion of a dichotomy. It's like the idea that if all we can conceive of is something, how can you have a notion of nothing? Nothing is an arbitrary construct that infiltrates our brain cells and our mental existence and begins to create dysfunction. So the idea, the word no or not is really something quite contrary to our nature. And I'm sure in early languages that idea of zero or nothing or something was really, what the hell is that? It makes no sense, right? So what I'm reflecting on today is this. I'm always very concerned for myself to have a contact, a basis for my existence has to have fundamentals. It's like in a day-to-day sense, as much as it is from an artistic point of view, there's obviously a concern that tries to encompass the bigger picture. I think it's fair to say that when I think about stuff, I try to engender something in my presentations that take in the bigger picture, not just myself, although it's all coming out of me. It's like what I feel is important, what I feel that works. So the post-Fukushima world, in a synopsis, is basically a synthetic world that'll be for robots. Any kind of what is a human being would be more aligned with the idea of a robot, which is something that Quinn Michael, this other guy I listen to, who is basically diametrically opposed to somebody like this Charles Veitch guy that I like, or even if you listen to Hank McGurk's dissertations on his ambient glow radio. Here's another pilgrim who is really giving it a good go at separating the synthetic from the organic. So what it is that I was reflecting on today, to some extent, is that the rational part of us, or what is considered to be a rational part, is susceptible to this dichotomy. And when I say dichotomy, there's a sense of being and self that is not divisive, that is not split. Like there is a sense that we have within ourselves that is entirely wholesome, that works. I'm trying to formulate these thoughts verbally. It's difficult. It's like a picture always works better for me in terms of expressing, not necessarily understanding, but expressing notions that are intuitive, or the organic part of our existence that is quite connected to what we understand to be an intuition, which is why artists have always been so held in high esteem. I think there is something that gives people a sense of self through someone else's vision of the wholesomeness as self. Like if you are enjoying some music, or if you go to a performance, the reason it works for me is because I have a sense of self that is not divided into adversarial or opposites. It's like a one feeling thing, right? That sort of nothing doesn't appear in it. It's like an everything feeling rather than a nothing feeling. Post-Fukushima is that nothing becomes a lot more credible in people's lives. That feeling of what I call a synthetic existence, which means it's it's an existence based on something other than what we have originally been formed from and are part of. This is interesting. This is fascinating, because there are a lot of people deciphering our dilemma as it is, from the point of view that, like, you rail against the machine. Well, what we're railing against, or what we're attempting to establish, is a sense of self that works, that is based on a very clear position that we feel for ourselves. And I'm going to propose this again. Something I've said quite often. It's connected to conscience, but that sense of caring, that we are part of something that is within this mystery we exist in, that is not just self, but a part of, meaning that we appreciate something other than ourselves, which is fundamentally caring. It's not like caring about self-gratification, self-gratification. Oh yeah, I care a lot about, getting everything that I want in my life. Well, we have a fundamental desire to survive and be in this world, so we nourish ourselves, we eat, all of that kind of stuff. But I'm talking about the bigger picture again, about how we fit into an organic reality, not a synthetic reality that is fabricated. Like Fukushima is part of a synthetic reality that is connected to what this Quinn Michael guy talks about, the AI, the AI consciousness. Now, he's actually quite a subversive as far as I'm being able to extract. There seems to be a fundamental understanding about the synthetic thing he talks about, but fails to connect to the organic part of it, even though he appears to be, he's like a kind of bohemian living out of his car. And, we never really know what whoever comes on YouTube and how they express themselves, what their background, what their intent might be. And I'm not going to go into his intent. All that I can say about him, if any of you are following this guy, he's fundamentally part of the synthetic notion, injecting aspects of the organic that are not really organic. For example, he says all the great art has nothing to do with caring. He brought up Picasso in his latest stream and said, Picasso was a degenerate people. Picasso was a mongrel amongst artists who succeeded because, as Michael says, the AI paid attention to him. And when I say AI, it's not something that I can identify or understand even, because from the point of view of the computer running things, I feel myself connected to the idea of AI as a synthetic reality. Again, it's an intuitive notion that I have. And a synthetic does not have caring included in it, except gratification, self-gratification, all the kind of things that you can replace. And this character, Quinn, talks about art as having some sort of external existence, reality, meaning to us outside of the concept of the producer, the man, the woman, the being that produces something that is called an artwork doesn't really care. Like in the sense of the bigger thing, not just me, it's like the bigger thing. You got to follow me in this. I've been giving, you have to follow this caring concept, because yeah, it's so obvious. We say it's so obvious, but reality as post Fukushima is everything about not giving a shit and not caring. I'm attracted to the souls out there that have this organic quality in their presentations, in their nature, in their being, that communicates fundamentally this aspect. This is how I see that we can recover and redeem something for ourselves, which is becoming more difficult because there is such an overwhelming sense of a part of our lives that is getting taken over, like that feeling like you wake up and you're not acting on your own accord. You're feeling like you're driven by some other force that comes from outside, not from within. This is an indication that there is something going mucky muck in our existence, in our day-to-day life, when it's not coming from within, as we comply with an existence that is imposed on us because we're under pressure in some way. I think this is the most obvious. I think that's the most obvious example I can give, that feeling I have myself of being pressured into doing something that I don't really want to do, but I have to, because it's something, if I don't, then my ass is grass sort of feeling. It's like, yeah, it doesn't come from myself. And I'm not someone that shirks away from working at something or feeling that I actually embrace the idea of making a real effort. It's like I've been making paintings for over 45 years. There is a real effort that goes into continuing something that is fundamentally, for the most part, for most artists, unless you're in the mainstream as a high-profile producer, creative producer, that's ignored. I mean, you know, I would say 90% of my work is ignored. I do have shows, I exhibit, and I'm in collections, and people have bought my work, but on the whole, I'm not embraced into the bosom of the synthetic world out there, which is a good thing. I'm not going to complain about that, because we do what we do, not based on the rewards, but based on an inner drive. That's what I'm saying. So this is something I have keenly identified within my own life, that there are things that I do that don't come from outside, but they come from inside, the inner world, right? I talk about the inner world. And this is all something to do with an existence in a really big picture. I'm looking at this from a really extended sort of far view. I'm looking in on the earth from a distance and saying, what is the reality? And I say post-Fukushima is a synthetic reality as opposed to an organic reality that we are now facing. And how do we counter this? Okay, and well, this is obviously important, because the counter means we need to replace it in some way or other. Gets very esoteric here, because I have this notion that things will become resolved very quickly as we shift back into an organic existence. And people can attach whatever they want to this from the point of view of like it being a green life, this whole green and environmental movement. What a fucking joke that is. I mean, there is no concept of what it is that we're facing, and you just sort of impose, yeah, do a bit of recycling, and you do the mantras, you say the mantras or whatever, but it has nothing to do with truly caring. This is fundamentally what separates the synthetic from the organic, which is a truly wholesome, deep caring for. That's what I'm saying. So the post-Fukushima world is everything attached to like that Trump existence, that self-gratification, that Jeffrey Epstein and all his reptile degenerates who went on his Lolita Express. And these people are they have such a phenomenal network that extends into incredible influence. So we're really up against it, because from that point of view of a synthetic existence, it's based on arbitrary and meaningless concepts that implant themselves and become real through our organic existence. That's what I'm saying. It displaces something that is natural in us. The world out there imposes itself when we leave a vacuum for it to enter. And I think this contingent among us has been able to undermine this aspect in our nature, and it's being displaced. And the way I see, the reason I'm thinking about this, the reason I was so motivated and quite frankly terrified by the notion that a synthetic reality like Fukushima could displace everything that is of importance and value to me. And even people coming out and saying, oh, it's like no big deal, like this Crow 77 guy who was interviewed all over the place and says, yeah, well, Galen Windsor swam in the fuel pools and all of this. This is a systematic and systemic protocol that is the AI functioning very well. People that insist that the organic is irrelevant. They'll spout all the green platitudes, but in essence will deny the most obvious example of how our deeper inner self is being displaced. Both what we understand to be a physical world and an emotional soul spirit world is being displaced every day in some form or other, because we're losing this primordial ability to care in the sense of something that we feel outside of ourselves and our connection to. And it's evident in so many different ways. If you look at younger people and their attachment to devices, I mean, this is so obvious. I mean, we're no longer involved. When I was younger, and my form of playing involved very few objects. Let me put it this way: the objects that I used in order to enjoy my day-to-day life were quite simple and fundamental. And you can say, well, you know, you existed in a time when you loved puppets in a puppet theater, which are probably almost obsolete now, although there's still puppeteers out there. But I think this is what the shifting away from a simple inner satisfaction. It has to be augmented. The synthetic world is an augmented world. It loses it diverts us from something that gives us a great deal of pleasure into having to escalate into areas of extended and continuous innovation. It's like the idea that creativity, I always say creativity is not rehearsed. Creativity is a spontaneous thing. But in the synthetic world, creativity becomes connected to continuous innovation. And I don't find this to be actually a necessary element in my own work. The idea of innovation is a byproduct. It's not something that I necessarily think about. I mean, I get diverted sometimes and I say, well, you know, in what sense am I being original with what I do? And originality is actually, it can be invigorating in some form or other, especially if you practice it like a guy like Tesla, who had an organic connection to the mystery and was able to extract, as that's the way it appears to me anyway, extract the fundamentals of this wholesome working side of things. Like he figured things out in terms of how they work, how they truly work. And there's a lot of people who've latched onto this guy in terms of free energy even, and the notions of our existence and the universe not being what is being told to us, which is a bunch of hooey. Every single thing that we get from the white coats over the last 150 years or so is all basically hooey, from quantum mechanics to back to Newton, to gravity, to the idea of a ball we live on, all the space nonsense that goes on the anniversary today of the moon landing, and Nixon talking on the phone to the astronauts on the moon with zero delay. He was on the phone talking to the astronauts on the moon with a zero delay on the phone. And now you talk to the ISS, supposedly the space station that's out there, and what you're getting is like a 10 or 11 second delay between talking. What the hell happened there? Going from 140 miles out to 240,000 miles out, all of a sudden now you have a delay on the ISS? Makes no sense. So I'm just saying, you can research yourself how things don't work within this synthetic world that is being formed and created around us. And I'm sure this is over a long period of time. This is something established. Like if you look at Chinese history, the dynasties, these are not decades, these are centuries and millennia of planning that goes into this AI synthetic existence that we're driven towards, and now it is escalated through Fukushima and most likely a lot of other of these toxic plants that are going to create havoc in our organic existence. So what I'm saying, it's maybe high-minded. You're going to say this is maybe high-minded and I'm not being articulate enough about this, but it's quite simple. That the synthetic world that I talk about, the Fukushima world, the post-Fukushima world, which is meant for robots and just automatons that comply, the other side of it is a humanity, a person that is willing to exist within the uncertainty of their own inner world, which is uncertain only from the point of view that it's a discovery, it's a learning, it's a process where we become, before we die, we move through from a little body to a big, gnarly and decrepit body. That's what it appears to be anyway. It may not need to be that way, but we go through a process, and at the end of it, what I say to myself, I want to have something in my toolbox that allows me to engage what will be eternity. Like I say, I have a romance with eternity. It's like the nothing concept is ridiculous because all our consciousness conceive of is something. So to say there is nothing after we appear to disappear when we die and we organically rot in the ground or we're whatever, this is ridiculous that there is nothing because we can't conceive of nothing. So take that off the table. It doesn't exist. You can pronounce yourself anything you want. You're still going to be who you are. Something. That's my thought. And what I pick up, what I get, I suppose a direction. I get a direction from a wrong as much as right. The idea of wrong and right is both a good direction because I listen to people and I see them falter, maybe even with good intentions, but I see them falter. And I learn from myself by someone else's mistake, if I can pick them up. Usually we need to go through our own mistakes to pick stuff up. At least that's been my experience, but not altogether. I think there's a component of being able to see somebody fuck up and do the wrong thing and then say, hey, I'm not going to do that. And, you know, YouTube is really quite helpful in that way because I see myself relating to what is being presented to me from the point of view that, well, that makes no sense. And it helps me. I actually get a degree of learning from that which is wrong. Well, that's nothing new either. I think, generally speaking, you know, you hit your thumb with a hammer and you say, I'm not going to do that again because it hurts. Or you put as a child, you put your finger in a flame. Oh, geez, that hurts. You learn from having experienced something that's wrong. It doesn't work. So my thoughts today, the post-Fukushima world, what I'm deciphering, what I'm beginning to understand is how this reality is becoming what is called artificial, the idea of AI, the idea of believing to be capable of withstanding this through some sort of mechanical, technical way is absurd, totally absurd. The Quinn character, totally absurd character. He may be part of this plant, this idea of putting stuff in people's brains that seduces a person into denying the inner world on the most fundamental level. That's what I perceive. That's what I see. And another fellow I listen to, I bring him up sometimes. I comment. He doesn't respond anymore. I think I pissed him off. Is the quantum of conscience guy who does superb analysis of the bastard subterfuge. But I said to him, as long as we are focused and concerned on the man's story, we're not able to tell our story. And this is where it needs to shift. That's what I do. This is why I make paintings, because they're fundamentally my story. I may take influences. I take in stuff from outside, like what's behind me. The patterning has a history of, in Muslim art, Muslims are not allowed to project physical representations of the world other than a sort of mathematical, kind of weird, fabulous. I mean, if you go to the Alhambra in Spain, the mosaics, the tile work is just phenomenal. And but I'm going to use this base work to introduce figuration. This is, I'm just living with it for a couple of months now, or a month anyway, on this formulation that's going on. And why did I deviate? Yeah, that intuition that informs us to within ourselves, that is predicated. Okay, I'll end it here. It's the post-Fukushima world will succeed, will continue, will escalate, will deteriorate our existence from the organic side, because fundamentally what is being displaced within us, both physically, emotionally, mentally, people we attach ourselves to, if they do not exhibit a very strong component in their presentation that lets you understand that they truly care about you. Like in the sense, obviously you're a screen and all this, but I'm talking in this connected sense of a world that we all share on all different planes. This is not just on one level. Existence as a physical, the physical existence is clearly a very powerful part in our day-to-day lives. But what is even more powerful, as pointed out by many philosophers, even people like Jane Roberts in her "We create our own reality" type of stuff, you know, these formulations, they make a lot of sense, that we have a connection to something that is wholly, totally organic. And what is organic, the most fundamental component that I see in this, that makes me an organic being, not a Fukushima creature, is that I care. I brought this up a lot of times, and whatever activity that I'm engaged in that doesn't activate within me on the most insignificant levels, if you're doing something around the house and if you just do it superfluously, and I've done it many times, it just doesn't end up working. You have to be connected to that moment, whether it's screwing in a screw or building an entire house or whatever. There has to be this, what I like the idea of calling it organic. It's not artificial, like, and there's a reason they call it AI, artificial intelligence. And my last note, I'll just end it here, the idea of words and thoughts, and which is what I'm using, and intelligence is highly overrated in order to get us into a framework of existence that will actually work. So the notion of a rational imperative behind everything we do is overplayed, and I'm not denying it. I am greatly attached to, even in my formulations, that it makes sense. I mean, that's how I use rational. But I think that intellectual side, all the people that come on with this sort of complex intellect are fundamentally, if their intentions are honorable, I listen to them, but I see it is so flawed to be attached to a synthetic structure, like the way words are being used now. They've lost their organic nature. They're being used arbitrarily. Like Shakespeare said, "A rose by any other name would smell as sweet." Well, how about coming up with the word for rose that is indistinguishable from its essence? That's sort of the idea of an organic existence. I think I'll end it there. I hope wow, 33 minutes. I guess you could attach some significance to that.